Welcome. I will call this regular meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper to order for May 3rd. I apologize for my tardiness, and I'm still struggling to open my own agenda. But I think I can remember what they've looked like in a general sense. I recognize that we are 2 days into or 3 days into emergency preparedness week. So I just invite all on council and all those viewing to be aware of the significance of that. Now is the time to take steps to be prepared for an emergency which might occur, and there's lots of information on our brand new restyled website that will help you prepare in the event that we do face an emergency. With that, councillors, you have today's proposed agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or other changes to be made to the agenda? Seeing no hands, I will ask for a motion, please, to approve the agenda as presented. Councillor Keller-Hurrenty, thank you for that. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Before I continue further, I want to thank Councillor Keller-Hurrenty for her service as Deputy Mayor in the last 2 months, and welcome Councillor Waxer to the role, which started officially 2 days ago. Thank you both. Councillors, you also have minutes of the regular meeting of April 19th, a draft copy. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? If not, might I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes of April 19th, 2022 as circulated? Councillor Hall, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Is there any business arising from previous minutes? All right, if not, so we can dispose of agenda item 4 and move to agenda item 5. 5.1 is a bylaw summary just for information. We can go to the first substantive matter, agenda item 5.2, Regional Assessment Review Board bylaw, which is here for third reading, having received consent from the superintendent on the 21st of April of this year. Is there a councillor prepared to make a motion to give third reading to bylaw number 245? Councillor Wilson, thank you for that. Any debate with respect to the motion or the proposed bylaw? It has, of course, been before council previously for 2 readings, and nothing has changed since second reading. So if there's nothing, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. That takes us to agenda item 5.3, traffic safety bylaw. Also here for third reading. Again, similar situation, but I wonder Mr. Given or Ms. Madonna administration has anything to contribute at this stage. Ms. Madonna, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. This bylaw has seen some edits since second reading, and as outlined in the bylaw report ahead of the bylaw, these are to enable enforcement of the paid parking zones and residential involved in the program. And so there's a few new definitions, and under section 7, the clauses that apply specifically to paid parking enforcement are in there as well. And the fines section has been updated accordingly, so we are suggesting that the fines should be in line with other parking infractions as it stands, so $65 being the consistent cost for those fines. And we have also received a new certification from Parks Canada. So because we made some edits between second and third reading, we did seek a new certification and we received that yesterday. So you're not seeing that in the agenda package. It is the old certification that is shown, but we did receive that, so you can have some confidence that we're not operating outside of those parameters.
Thank you for that. That was appreciated. Are there any questions of council for administration? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, if I could direct the question regarding the charge for vehicles, motorhomes pulling a trailer. If a vehicle is parked on the street, how would we communicate that to the owner of the motorhome that they, in fact, from what I read, have to pay for 2 stalls? Or am I misreading that section?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Melnick, this was a clause that generated some discussions internally because over length parking is not allowed in the central business district. So this clause is, and associated fine is really for Geeky Street, where we're expanding the paid parking program this year. And that's a good question that I haven't really turned my head to, but essentially, we have been painting lines in parking stalls and to delineate specific areas, and we find that enables more efficient parking downtown. We see better use of the space, essentially. And so if someone parked over 2 parking stalls, that is the intention here, but how would they know that and how would they find out is a good question. It's in the bylaw. I think it's a commonly understood practice, but specifically how that would be communicated, I'm afraid I don't have an answer to that.
Mr. Gibbon.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just to supplement what Director Nadal said for Councillor Malik, I think this is an example of those ongoing refinements that we'll have to do with paid parking and with all of our bylaws. In fact, as we see those small situations and have to figure out how we'll address those small situations should they come up. This is a good example of that. Administration is also re-examining the need to delineate each exact spot or whether they should be the parking zones. And so I think we'll see some continued refinement in that area. I think flagging this provision is worthwhile, and administration will keep that on our list of, okay, so now what do we do about that one for our next iteration? We certainly don't see any of these bylaws as finished products that shall never be changed. If there are unique circumstances that come up that we have to figure out either an administrative process to enable or sort of to deliver the bylaw, we'll do so. If there's something that suggests the bylaw needs to be amended or changed, we will bring that forward to council. But thank you for listening.
Thank you for that. Councillor Benoit.
I have an emergent concern that just came to my attention attending a regional board meeting when we were giving a roundtable and updating where our communities were at and new initiatives that we were taking on. And I brought up paid parking, and a council member from outside of Jasper, obviously, brought up a topic of Indigenous status cards and how that might relate to our parking. And if we've taken some time to consider that, because apparently there might be some different, I think, rules that might apply for those visiting from outside of town that might have that. And I'm not exactly sure if there's stickers for windows or there's a request for cards and how that's going to work out. And I apologize if this is a surprise. I didn't mean to bring that out of nowhere today. Thank you.
Your Worship, I can speak to that for Councillor Notice. So no, that isn't something administration to consider. At this time, there'd be no special provision for anybody with that status. And I've seen other municipalities that have a variety of waivers of parking requirements or the requirement to pay for parking. Other municipalities may have it for vehicles displaying a veteran's plate, for example, or for people with mobility issues that are parking outside of mobility designated stalls. All that's within the purview of council. So there's no specific accommodation made for that right now. I'm not aware of any legal reason why we would have to give that accommodation unless council chose to give it explicitly. And this bylaw is not set up for that, and our system is set up for that. The challenge that I could imagine would be how we would identify that, because I believe that that kind of, I think, I'm not sure if status is the term. I think there's status, but verifying that status is not something I think that is typically done on the outside of the vehicle. And I would be a bit reluctant to start to ask people to validate their status to get 2 hours of free parking, given the real, I think, historical challenges around asking Indigenous people to prove the fact that they're Indigenous. So that is not accounted for in the bylaw today. It could be something council could consider along with any other sort of freebies, if you wanted to call it that, for special identified groups. And I think council would want to really carefully consider the implications of identifying any group and separating them from the general requirement that all parkers should pay other than just for residents.
I appreciate that, and I was asking because I wasn't sure if it was considered, and it was the first I heard about it. And you know, from their perspective, they thought there might be some provisions that were already mandated. So that's great. It's good to hear, and you know, it could be one of those things that we consider as things change and we move along. Thank you.
I have just a couple of comments before I call the motion. I'm not sure whether these can be adjustments that don't impact the certification that we have received, and I really appreciate the information that we in fact received 2 certifications for the same bylaw. I just note that in section 7.21 and following, there is reference to controlled paid parking, whereas it begins with controlled paid parking, and that is the defined term. So I can understand when somebody would type paid, but that's not the term that we use in the definition section. So I think it might be appropriate just to change that before the bylaw gets actually signed. I also had just some questions about wording, particularly when we're trying to ascribe responsibility for parking contrary to the rules, and we talk about operators leaving or parking vehicles, and I suppose it's technically arguable that if you've left it, you're not operating it, which leaves an owner on the hook, I think, which is fine, but just the style, and I'm not suggesting we delay for that. And finally, section 7.25, it gives some discretion to the CAO, which presumably might be a discretion that could encompass the Indigenous question raised by Councillor Demoto, although it doesn't expressly do so. But I wonder whether, as the CAO develops that list of criteria, there might be some consideration given to fleet vehicles. Because I think the intent of council was to provide residents with an exemption. But if a resident owns a fleet of vehicles, do they all get an exemption? I think that is something that we don't need to address in the bylaw, but the eligibility requirements to be established by the CAO might address that sort of potential issue. Mr. Bitter.
Your worship, so I can give council an early sort of view of how I would interpret council's previous direction, and in relation to this clause, I would interpret council's direction that there be a provision for resident individuals and persons in the traditional sense, rather than persons in the corporate sense. So if a human being, a single human being had multiple vehicles registered to them in their name, then I would see that being conceivably a fleet of vehicles registered to one human being, then those would all fall under this resident provision. I would not interpret council's previous direction to create a exemption from paying for parking for resident businesses. So a Jasper business is not an individual. My interpretation of what council told administration before was that Jasper people should not have to pay for parking, not that Jasper businesses should not have to pay for parking. So in the early read, there may be an additional complication, again, in the nature of the types of things council might want to consider for next year's iteration of the program, or potentially any revisions that we do after the close of the season this year. We could consider that. But at this time, administration is seeing that the eligibility requirements would be that you are a person in the human being sense rather than a person in the corporate sense, and that any vehicles that are registered to that individual human being living in Jasper would meet the qualification to get the resident exemption. But that would not be extended to corporations in the municipality of Jasper that may have a fleet of vehicles.
Thank you, Mr. Given. I just asked that you, as you set the criteria, take into consideration the definition of person that we have included in the bylaw, which includes corporations and everything else. So we have said a person means a corporation, but for effectiveness, what I hear you saying is that maybe it doesn't. So I think we strive for consistency and interpretability for residents, however they might be defined. Anyway, I leave that to you as you formulate those criteria that are entrusted to you under the bylaw. Councillor Wilson.
Might realize not coming. Oh, there it is. The credits are registered to a person, a resident, not to a vehicle. I think prior to this meeting, we were discussing that a resident could register a few different vehicles, plates underneath the resident account. If one of those vehicles was a commercial vehicle, they couldn't register that vehicle under their personal account.
If the vehicle was registered to a corporation, to a corporate entity, then again, my initial sort of reaction at the table here today would be no. If it was a vehicle used for commercial purposes that was registered in a private individual's name, I would say yes. You get the distinction there?
Yeah. I wouldn't, in my mind, I don't think that's the direction council gave. I think we directed that we give credit to people, because many people drive, their small business vehicle registered under their company. So I would say, I think the suggestion should be that a person has 500 credits to use whatever vehicle they're driving, and they can use up those credits. This is going to get pretty sticky, I think, if we're having to register each license plate. I know you have to use the license plate to, although the account, I think, supersede that, but I don't know.
Your Worship, frankly, administration didn't see an issue with implementing the paid parking program for this year. We can appreciate that there may be nuances or sort of unexpected situations that would come up. And the definition of a person between a corporation and an individual wasn't something that we considered before this. Absolutely something we'll consider now. And would suggest that the bylaw does need third reading so we can actually enact the paid parking system. I think this is a good thing for us to flag and be able to capture for subsequent years. And if it comes up that there is a significant issue, then we can identify that, through the course of the program and bring forward revisions to council if necessary. But at this time, administration hadn't imagined that this was going to be a material issue in the scope of the program.
Thank you for that, and I do appreciate the need to give third reading so we can be prepared for the paid parking. And I do think that the openness of section 7.25 allows at least potentially the CAO to address these issues without necessarily amending the bylaw. But if it becomes problematic, I'm sure you'll be back. But it was something that I just read into the bylaws as I prepared for the meeting. Councillor Wilson.
My apologies, but just a further question, what were the provisions given last year for, say, a commercial vehicle like a tradesman or et cetera, conducting business within the central business district and parking a vehicle? Like, are they required to pay for parking if they're a commercial company doing work on a commercial building?
Mr. Tom, go ahead.
Your worship, through Councillor Wilson, I think this goes back to what Mr. Given outlined. It depends if the vehicle is registered under the company's name or if it's registered under the individual's name. But also broadly, how we dealt with businesses downtown is that 15-minute drop-off zones are free to use, but also if there's an active work taking place, as in if someone is unloading materials from the vehicle, if someone is attending the vehicle and our officers can see that, there's also a 15-minute allowance provided for that. And then in other circumstances, when work is taking place and a vehicle is required to be parked in the parking lane for the performance of that work, then they would be subject to a use of public space permit that they would have to apply for. So same for a trailer for a construction project that would be parked in the parking lane that requires permitting. And in the absence of direction in that sense, potentially would still be subject to the fees of paid parking, as in that fee, that stall is not generating the revenue that it would otherwise. So unless there's a clear exemption provided, it's subject to the fees, but potentially also subject to a different permit.
Councillor DeMota.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to clarify on the question that Councillor Wilson had asked, and if I just may reach out to you. The concept of, let's say, a plumber has to go and work at a business in the downtown core, and there's no other parking available, let's say in the back, or if there's no back rear access, and they need their equipment and supplies in the van to go back and forth in there. And it's just kind of one of the ideas you're talking about. Okay, so I can see that there's going to be some growing gaps in this, and I guess we'll have to address them as they come up, because you can't think of everything, right? And if it does become an issue, I'm sure administration will address it. But that's a good point. You'll always think about this. Thank you.
If there are no further questions for administration, is there a councillor prepared to present the motion that council give third reading to bylaw number 244 of the traffic safety bylaw? Councillor Wilson, thank you. Any debates? I'm sorry, Councillor Kelleher.
And overall, there we go. Sorry about that. So Schedule B, 50 to 30 is also part of this bylaw. And I have to say I'm in favor of all about the parking bylaw, but I will not be voting in favor of the bylaw because I do not believe that should be totally 30. I have no problem with all the residential areas being 30. I have no problem with the downtown core being 30. I do have a problem of bringing Connaught down to 30 year round. You know, it's a, may to say 4-lane highway. cannot. There's a lot of people go to work at 2, 3, 4 in the morning to CN. Go to the industrial area, and when the train is in, it's 10 minutes to go around at 30 to go through the town. I have no problem with it going down to 30 in central town. Even in summer, I can live with the 30, but I think it's excessive. Also, our fire department will have to go 30 because they're supposed to obey the bylaws. And ambulance can go 10 over. The only people that can really speed is our CMP with flashing lights. So, you know, emergency in the middle of the night, I'm sure they're going to speed, but we're asking them to speed. And is that fair? So I cannot support going to 30 year round. I'm in favor mostly of the bylaw, but it's not separate, so I will be voting against.
Thank you, Councillor Keller-Hurrenty. Any further debate? I will call the question. The question is, of course, to give third reading to bylaw number 244, the traffic safety bylaw. All those in favor? Those opposed? There is one opposed. That was carried. Thank you for that. That takes us to agenda 5.4, commercial use of public space bylaw, which is before us for first and second reading. And we have seen this before, but Mr. Given, do you or other members of staff wish to introduce the topic?
Thanks, Your Worship. Director Nadana prepared the report and is the most familiar with the material, so she can provide a brief overview to council.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. The bylaws before you today for first and second reading, but depending on if council has concerns or it would like to see any changes, there is an opportunity for that, of course. And so essentially the changes that are presented here are to the fee schedule, and that is to formalize the direction that council provided by motion on the fee for the use of parking stalls in the context of sidewalk seating or retail extensions. And I apologize for the formatting on the agenda. That schedule should be on a different page, but the information is there regardless. So the information that was there previously is sidewalk seating, which is the very last line item on that page, was $100 application fee plus $25 per seat. So that is reflective of a time when we were not allowing the use of parking lanes through the commercial use of public space bylaw. So we did add a few items here. So the sidewalk seating permit application fee becoming a separate item, so that to remain at $100, but it's shown separately. And then the use of sidewalk seating on the public sidewalk remaining at $25 per seat. And really the new item is the following two lines, which are the $825 per parking stall for 2022, which is reflective of a 50% discount off of the ongoing charge, which would be $16.50 per parking stall for 2023 and beyond. So this is implementing council's motion from earlier this year. We hope the formatting and how we are presenting the fees reflects what council's intention was. And there is another item that is not reflected here because it all says sidewalk seating, but another opportunity for council to consider today is fees for items that are not sidewalk seating, but that are commercial use of public space in the parking lane. So for example, the bylaw does provide administration and the CAO broad authority to allow permits, which could mean that for example, a bike shop who would want to do bike rentals could use a parking stall. We've received a request from the motorcycle tour company. So for example, they would like to use the space, but it's not sidewalk seating. So whether that per stall fee would remain the same for that type of use or not is also a question that council might want to explore today. So again, It is here for first and second reading, but depending on the outcome of those conversations at the council table, we could do first only or proceed however council may see fit.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Councillor Gordon.
Well, I'm grateful that this is addressed because I think it's been a concern among some councillors as well as people in the community, particularly potential users of these spaces. Now, I'm just wondering, within page 7 of 8, which would be 42 of 90 on our agenda package today, where it does say sidewalk seating, use of parking lane 2022 season. Do we need to use the term sidewalk seating, or could we just use the term parking lane or a derivative of that? Because we've established that the cost of doing business in that area or in one of those stalls is $16.50 for an entire year, and I believe that's from May 1st to October 24th or something to that effect. So I would feel comfortable moving forward with this if we didn't address that using the sidewalk seating term, and if that's been contemplated. Thank you.
Mr. Kidder.
Thanks, Your Worship. Councillor Moda, you're correct. I don't think that, so first off, this is here for first and second reading. Council can choose to amend the bylaw if they see fit. I think administration would largely agree that the deletion in Schedule A of the first instance of sidewalk seating, where it says sidewalk seating dash permit application fee, could simply be permit application fee. The third instance of sidewalk seating, where it says sidewalk seating use of parking lane 2022 season, could simply be use of parking lane 2022 season. And then that final instance, versus sidewalk seating use of parking lane 2023 and beyond, could simply be use of parking lane 2023 and beyond, which would leave that second reference, which is literally seats on the sidewalk seating, and would clarify that the other instances are broader in application and not just about physical seats on the sidewalk.
Councillor Milne.
Thank you, Your Worship. In response to the commentary made about other uses, I think we have that covered in section 4.1.5, which are other similar uses. The chief administrative officer or designates discretion would be the clause that would allow you to issue a permit for public space in the parking zone for, say, a bicycle shop or retail store, or for example, the motorcycle shop. Is that the purpose of that? It actually is like a catch-all.
Go ahead, Mr. Kidder.
Your Worship, I think for Councilor Malik, yes, I agree that administration has fairly broad latitude to handle those instances of other types of commercial use of public space that may happen within the parking lane. There is the commercial use of public space use permit fee of $50. There's also the commercial public space use fees of $50 to $400. So there's some latitude for us to establish it. But I think from a ease of use from applicant perspective, I think being a little bit clearer about that there's a permit application fee of $100, that there is a, to use the parking lane in 2022, however you intend to use it, will cost $825 per stall, and to use the parking lane in 2023 and beyond, in whatever way you intend to use it, will cost you $1,650 per stall. Probably makes a lot of sense to provide that clarity for one of our businesses or any other applicant that may just pull this file off the website just to clarify that interpretation for them.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Island. I have a question about the fees. When are they due? I know it's not on here, I'm just questioning.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Hall, we have not held up applications on that basis, so we essentially the bylaw is catching up to the process, so we already are charging the $8.25 per parking stall for 2022. Applications are open and we've been processing them, and payment is required before installations can take place. So that is already enacted operationally.
I seem to recall, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, but we talked about for this season, extending it till the fall. Am I wrong? I just had the, I remember this conversation.
Councillor Kelleher.
I agree with you, Councillor Hall. I think when we talked about this, we had said that anybody that couldn't afford to pay upfront, that they kind of would have it paid by the end of the season. I think we did that in 1920 as well when we started due to COVID, because not a lot of people could afford it upfront, and I think we have in the past allowed them to pay throughout the summer or by fall.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm only aware of one applicant who requested an arrangement of that nature, and Mr. Jones has granted it already. So we are working with business owners to make it happen. We don't have a formal process in place, but we've been accommodating requests as they come in.
Thank you, Mr. Dodd. I want to return to your opening comments because I'm uncertain about fees. So the permit fee, is it intended to be different for sidewalk seating as opposed to any other commercial use or on sidewalk activities?
Thank you for the question, Your Worship. I think by wordsmithing or making changes to the table that's here, we need to be cautious that my understanding of, and that's the content of the bylaw previously, that is not necessarily a position from administration, but that this bylaw covers all kinds of commercial uses, including filming and other items of that nature, where the permit fee of $50 was intended at those other uses like farmers markets, busking, food trucks, filming, versus sidewalk seating had its own permit application fee, which was set as at $100. And that is historically how this bylaw was presented. So yes, there is a distinction there.
And is there then an intent to have a permit fee or other than the sidewalk? So for the parking lane is, because again, if we think about businesses that could use the parking lane, it's not exclusive to sidewalk seating, or pardon me, it wouldn't be sidewalk, it would be restaurant seating, but it could be other uses. Is there a differentiation between permit fees for the type of use for the parking lot?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think this question would be up for council discussion and determination. I think if council felt that the use of the parking lane, not for sidewalk seating, should see a lower application fee, then we could leave sidewalk seating permit application fee as is. Or my suggestion for the alternative would be if it's at sidewalk seating or use of parking lane permit application fee, then it would resolve that fee would be 100 and not 50. But that item does require clarity.
Thank you. I will return. I have another set of questions, but I see Councillor Demota had his hand up and I began to speak, and then Councillor Keller.
That's fine. I'm going to defer. I'm trying a new thing and I'm going to see if the questions I have get asked before I ask them. So I'm not the one talking all the time.
Except to defer. Councillor Keller.
Just for clarification, I'm curious if somebody is doing renovation to a building downtown and they're taking the parking lane, do they pay the $50 permit or the $100 permit? How does that work?
Mayor Arlen, through the Councillor Kelleher MP, if I understand the question correctly, that is not subject to commercial use of public space. That is street use. It's a different permit type, and I believe we don't have a fee for that permit. So there's a process, but there is no fee
Thank you.
Councillor Demoto.
Okay, seeing as that there are no other questions at the moment. Again, referring back to the sidewalk seating permit application fee, if is commercial public use fees or permit fee in place of someone that wanted to use a similar footprint adjacent to their property and making sure that there's still enough space for people to go around. They're following the same parameters as a restaurant, but aren't using it for seating. Does that fall into that category in Schedule A under the first two applications? Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Gibbon, go ahead.
Thanks, Your Worship. Councillor, maybe you can clarify sort of the scenario that you're trying to illustrate. I'm having a bit of a difficult time imagining it, and there are lots of different ones. So maybe you can just illustrate it a little bit more.
Well, maybe the request hasn't come up, but let's say I'm on Connaught Drive and next door to me, there's a restaurant and they're able to use the sidewalk seating area. And then I want to use it for retail space, similar size space, but I don't have seat fees. But let's say I want to put up some retail merchandise for purchase, whatever it is, whether it's clothing or goods of some sort.
Okay, so for example, rolling out your displays and using up, a meter or two in front of your building in the same way that somebody might put up small bistro tables for two in front of the restaurant. Is that the kind of the idea?
Correct. Yes.
So I don't know it. So first I'd say that bylaw allows administration enough flexibility under the first 2 points: commercial public space use permit fee and commercial public space use fees. You can see there's a range of fees there. Administration would have some flexibility to interpret the request and apply an appropriate fee, because there are some different types of scenarios that we could imagine. So the flexibility is built in there. And I would say at this stage that administration would do that as a commercial public space use. And in that case, they'd be required to pay the permit fee of $50 plus some equitable amount in the range of that 50 to 400. So it would fit into those two. And we would, because we, as you say, can't identify the per seat cost because they're individual in the seats. So we would make an estimation of the amount of space that's required for that and ensure that the fee that was charged under that second line in Schedule A would be, commensurate with the amount of space that they're using.
Thank you for all of that. Final point that I wish to make, and it's for council consideration, not for administration, but whether in context of giving first and second reading potentially to this bylaw, we take a look at the fees for farmers market. I think in fairness, when that fee was set, it was recognized that the parking lots that were being used between Peaky Street and Turret, between the churches, were not, they were free parking. And we have allowed that. I think there is one business license issued, but lots of businesses, and I went by and counted the stalls. There are 51 stalls in those two parking lots. And council has now ascribed a value to a parking stall and has further expressly by its January 4th motion voted to include those parking lots in the inventory of paid parking spaces. And so if there are businesses operating there which might be in conflict with other business in the downtown, and there is no adjustment for the fees, I'm not sure that we're doing any equity. And recognizing that for the summer season, it's only once a week, that is still an average of 7 stalls a day that are removed from our paid parking inventory by that activity. And I invite council to give consideration whether or not we might look at an adjustment to that price. So on an annual basis, do they have 12 weeks of activity there? I'm not quite sure, but however many weeks of activity at $60 a week. And in exchange, the municipality gives up revenue potential for an average of 7 stalls every week. So it just seems to me that there is an equity consideration for us to address. Councillor DeMoe.
Well, it seems that we're on the same wavelength, so I appreciate that, and that's one thing that I wanted to talk about. And I didn't know how many stalls there were, so if there's 51, and we've established that a full day of parking is $12 for one stall if you wanted to park downtown in the parking lot. So that would be somewhere around $612 for the day. We've established for 2022 that we were going to have half rates for what is considered a parking stall for $3 an hour downtown in the commercial core on the street, which initially was $1,620. So I appreciate that question, and I think that should be considered. The point I wanted to make was for council's consideration as well. And bylaws do take some process. It has to go to Parks Canada, etc. I'm wondering if it's needed right now to have the second item of addressing 2023 and beyond for the street parking, because I would like to revisit this after our first full season of parking in the community. And do we need to go forward with $1,600 and whatever $20 that is? Because if we're making enough revenue from our visitors, which the goal is to focus on the pressure of use in the downtown core at peak season. So we're not at peak season now. Technically, we're supposed to be May 1st going forward. There's a lot of parking in town right now. So to establish a full season rate for a parking stall, I don't think it's worthwhile at this point. I understand the math and the reasoning behind that. But again, I think it'd be better not to have that here now and then to readdress the bylaw if we want to change it for 2023 and beyond. That's for council's consideration. It's just a thought from me. Thank you.
In terms of process, I think it would be out of order for council to reconsider the annual fee until after January 4th of next year. The council deliberated that point. There was a specific motion. That motion carried our own terms of reference. Our procedural bylaw says that we can't reconsider until a year has gone by or there has been an election. So I appreciate your argument, but that bus has departed.
It had me thinking. It's a good one.
In any event, we are left here with options. We have a bylaw that has been presented that could get first reading and then motions for particular amendments. Or I suppose we could have motions for amendments and defer both first and second reading. If I might ask administration, in the absence of the passage of this bylaw, is administration able to proceed under the previous bylaw and facilitate applications this year?
Your worship, I think that the significant change would be in the value. council gave specific direction that the value should be $825 per stall. And that's the really sort of operative thing in this proposed change. If council doesn't doesn't pass this bylaw, then we would not be able to collect that fee in accordance with the previous direction that council gives, that the fee should be that much. So the bylaw does need to go, if council wishes us to be able to enact that action, we need this bylaw to move through the process. If it did not move through the process, the administration would be obligated to charge the old fees, which I believe were, I'm not remembering off the top of my head, Ms. Nadal, if you remember what the fees were last year or in the existing schedule. So 100 plus 25 per seat.
Thank you for that.
Your worship, so, just in terms of process, if council identify some items that they wish to amend, I think the appropriate process would be to move an amendment to the bylaw, striking wording, adding wording, or changing wording or fees, to have votes on those proposed amendments to the bylaw, and then to have a proposal for, or a motion for first reading of the bylaw as amended.
Yes, thank you for that. And I will say that I was drawn to Councillor Demota's initial comments about simply striking the word sidewalk seating in the schedule. The bylaw itself, I have no issues with any of the wording of the bylaw. My attention has all been focused on the schedule. And I think that if there was a consistent permit application fee, whether for sidewalks or parking line, that would be beneficial. So we could just remove the wording that specifies sidewalk seating permit application, just a permit application. Use of public sidewalk, sidewalk seating applies there, 25 cents, pardon me, $25 per seat. For on sidewalk makes sense. I take it that any other commercial use would be discretionary. The discretion of the CAO, and it would be $50 to $400. I can live with that. And then for use of the parking lane, again, I would support what I understood Councillor Demota to say, just remove sidewalk seating and just indicate use of a parking lane for 2022 would be $825, and beyond that, 2023 and beyond, $1,650. And I'm happy to leave consideration of farmers markets fees to another day and further date. Mr. Gibbon.
Your worship, the only thing I'd say in addition to what you outlined, which is certainly where I was seeing the schedule, Director Nadon brought up that an appropriate line for that first instance of where it says sidewalk seating might be sidewalk seating or use of parking in permit application. Because then it does clarify that the one right below is subject to that $100 application fee, as well as the ones further below that are for the use of the parking. So I think in that instance, sidewalk seating, you might want to keep that, but add in or use of parking lane.
I would accept that as a friendly amendment to the motion I haven't made, but I'm encouraging somebody to make.
Yeah. I would be willing to make that motion as amended by Mayor Ireland. I did want to question though, the farmers market, just as we're talking about it currently, and we can't talk about it in the future, but is not the farmers market a not-for-profit organization that applies for the use of the space, which would then be exempt from fees?
It might be, but there's not an asterisk there on the schedule. There's an asterisk for some other fees that indicates that there are exemptions, but the farmer's market itself, it's not an exemption, it's just a prescribed fee. And my only observation is that we prescribe that fee under, I think, vastly different circumstances, and it might be time to reconsider that. Councillor Melvin.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've been looking for a map for me to help to understand the 51 parking stalls. Are they all in paid parking, or are they some in not paid parking? Because I seem to think only one of those lots is actually a lot that we are going to collect parking. And is the other one not our lot and not paid parking? If you could clarify, I'm looking for a map to help me to.
So I was as well, and if you go back to the agenda for January 4th, regular council meeting, and also look at the minutes from that meeting. The minutes indicate that there was a motion that adopted some red lines on Geeky Street to extend paid parking and parking lots shown in royal blue. And when I looked at that map, it looked to me like the royal blue went from Geeky Street to Tuart Street. So I may have misinterpreted that, but the recommendation that had come forward was not to include parking lots, but the motion that was approved was to include parking lots. And as I understood, both of those parking lots were included in paid parking inventory. I could be wrong, but anybody that has quick internet access can see, and Ms. Madone has her hand up, so she's already seen. I think we're both included. Ms. Madone.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've been working on the paid parking program, and I can confirm that both of those lots are municipal and they are both included in the paid parking program.
Thanks for the clarity. Appreciate it.
Councillor DeLorme.
Well, I really like where Councillor Wilson was going, so thank you. I was wondering if we could, if it's okay for me to ask administration clarity on reaching out to the farmers market to see on average how many stalls there are. And you know, I think we should take into consideration that some of the groups that come in there to rent space, I guess they disperse the $60 between everybody over there. If we establish a price that's higher for it based on other criteria that we've already used for the community, if $306, for example, is going to break some people's profit and reason for being there, and is it worth actually doing so? You know, I don't think our intention is to make things difficult on people. I understand what the farmers market brings to the community and what it represents, and so I think that we might need a little bit more information before we make a decision on those drastic increases. But I think that if they are collectively considered a nonprofit, if the organization is, that maybe we should have an asterisk there to at least alleviate that issue for now.
Councillor Wilson, now, did you make a motion?
I think I did. I think there's a motion on the table. That council approved. Bylaw 244 commercial use of public space bylaw for first reading, as amended by Baron.
Might I suggest that I'll turn to Mr. Given to see whether this works for administration, but might the motion be to give first reading to bylaw number 244? 46.
Scroll up.
And direct administration to return with amendments as discussed today. Do you have a clear enough view of, and it's only amendments to Schedule A that we could talk about.
Your worship, maybe just the recording secretary, just for complete clarity, how we would interpret that would be motion to, for first reading and direction to administration to return with the following amendments for second reading. The Schedule A be revised to say that the item currently called sidewalk seating permit application fee be retitled sidewalk seating or use of parking lane permit application fee, and that the reference to sidewalk seating be deleted from Schedule A in the areas where it describes the fees for the 2022 season and the fees for the 2023 season. So that specifies the three changes I think that I heard council discuss.
I think that's fair. Councillor Wilson, you're
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
you're happy with that, and there is clarity for the rest of council. All right, there is a motion then to give first reading to bylaw number 246 and to direct administration to return with amendments for the second reading as discussed. Any debate on that? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. That takes us to agenda item 6, request for decision, beginning with 6.1, activity center renovations. Mr. Given?
Your worship, I'll give a brief introduction, recognizing there's some members of council who weren't able to be present at the last meeting. And I also appreciate that there might be, given the scale of the project and the complications, some discussion. We're not assisted today the same way that we were previously at committee with our full bank of assistance, but I believe Mr. Reed may be available online to answer some of the operational questions. But in front of you, you have an RFD with a recommendation from committee in 3 parts. And maybe I'll discuss really what the major items are that are included in those recommendations. The first is all of the required scope items. And if you go through the package, the required scope items really are focused on the core operation of the building, addressing building code and life safety deficiencies across all of the arena, the activity centers and product center, some accessibility improvements, some life cycle and renewal and maintenance, and a very small amount of operational or functional improvements in the building. And the amount of those required scope items is $10,160,444. The majority of that $10 million comes from outside sources. This is essentially the ISIP grant that the municipality received a number of years ago. So the funding breakdown for that $10 million is $541 from capital reserves, $240,000 from the federal gas tax and community building fund, $4,420,015 of proposed debenture, $2,280,914 of MSI capital funding, and then $714,515 from the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. So as you can see, of those required scope items, which are mostly focused on the what I'll call back of house equipment and mechanical within the facility, the vast majority of that funding is coming from outside sources. The second motion, and we can break down exactly what that covers in a little more detail if council wishes, but it is contained in the documentation in the report. The second portion of the motion, item number 2, is discusses the inclusion of additional items that council requested administration develop more information on. These included a expansion to the arena dressing rooms that would expand to both the west and south of the building. So adding essentially 5 new full-size change rooms in a 1-story addition where what we'll call that driveway is to the west of the building, and also expanding the building to the south to create essentially a new hallway that would allow the existing change rooms to expand into that old hallway space. The cost of that project would be $3,355,756. The other items in the council requested scope include conversion of the existing sauna that is in the basement of the activity center into a functional washroom. Administration's understanding is that sauna doesn't and hasn't worked for some time. And conversion into a washroom, universal access washroom, would provide a lot of functionality for that area. And the final item is the aquatic center and the complete renovation of all existing change rooms. Council may remember that in the initial discussion, the focus within the aquatic center, which is included in that first category of items in the $10 million, was really around accessibility and the access from the universal change rooms onto the pool deck. That would have required some small adjustments to the men's change room because they're directly adjacent, but the women's change room would have been left untouched. This additional $342,000 would do a full renovation of both the men's and women's change rooms to a modern standard, providing finished all the features within those facilities, and there'd be equal treatment between the two different parts of the building. So those council requested scope items come to a total of $3,831,491. The recommended strategy for funding that is broken down like this: $1.8 million from the MSI fund, $900,000 from the federal gas tax and the Canada Community Building Fund, and then the balance of $1,131,491 from the venture. So those are the items that council requested some information on. There was a list of other options and alternatives the committee did not choose to recommend forward. And that makes up that second category under point number 2. And then finally, point number 3 is essentially housekeeping, giving administration direction to amend the capital budget in accordance with whatever items that council approves. So if council approved these items as recommended from the committee or any other sort of subset, we would still need that direction to administration to make sure that the capital plan now conforms with this detailed plan. Outside of the specifics of what's in and out of the project, administration would advise council. It's important for council to give direction to administration so the project can continue to move forward. The design team and our consultants are essentially waiting word from council on which parts of the project they should enter the next level of detailed design. And as you'll see referenced in the attached report, there is a process, and our design estimates will get more and more refined as the team is able to develop the information with greater specificity and detail. We're currently at a class 4 estimate, meaning that we cannot give council more advice until we're able to do those detailed designs. And we certainly don't want to do detailed designs on portions of the project that council doesn't wish us to complete. So, Your Worship, with that, I will be prepared to answer any questions. Mr. Reed is here as well on screen on Zoom, and I believe between the team we can answer anything the council may have for us.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I'm looking for just a little bit of clarity. The first recommended motion is that we approve this project with the exception of the renovation of dressing rooms, but when I look down in required scope funded, it is there. Is it different? Thank you.
Your Worship, if I may, and I want to thank Councillor Hall for bringing this up. That portion of the first motion, with the exception of renovations to the existing restrooms, should actually be deleted. And I will take responsibility for including that in there. At our last meeting, we had a discussion about, what does this amount of money, the 10 million plus the 3.35 million below, what does that get you? And administration was clear that that would get you fully renovated existing change rooms, plus the 5 new change rooms on the west side. That is all contained in the money amounts that you see, the financial amounts that you see here. If council wished to basically build the new portion, but leave the existing stuff as it was, it would only save you $400,000. So this overall, if that's what council wished to do, the overall amount here could be reduced by $400,000. Administration did briefly consider recommending that to council, and decided not to. There was this line of, with the exception of renovations to the south side, and administration did not end up recommending that for it. So for the 10,160,444 plus the 3,355,756, you would see fully renovated change rooms on the south side, the new hallway on the south side, and the additional 5 full-size greenfield change rooms added on the west side. So it's my apology for that item getting through there. I'm thankful that we're not asking council to add money to something that I said was included in this price, because all of the items I just described are included in the money that's here. That exclusion was something administration considered recommending, and in the end did not, and that was left over in the motion.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Hall, and thank you for the explanation, Mr. Gibbon. Right, are there further questions of administration on the topic? Councillor Reports.
Yeah, just for clarity for the community, because again, it's all about sellability and palatability. And, you know, I've had some concerns about the overall cost on this project. So when we look at the schedule, the financial under the funding sources for the 10 million and the 3.8 below, the debenture portions, and I think I tried to clarify this last week, and maybe I wasn't clear. There's about $5.5 million that are going to be attributed to debenture, and we replace that. We pay that through tax dollars, correct? So I think what I've been trying to sell is for a 39% investment, or for roughly 40% investment that the community makes, we're getting 60% back in our structure from other funding sources that we've applied for. We've used that model in the past in other departments or soon. And so I just think that way, it's a little bit more understandable on, you know, the value that the community is getting with this for the dollar that they're contributing. I think that was more of a point of clarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keller.
To you, Mayor Arnold, to Mr. Gibbon. If we went ahead with this expansion of 5 dressing rooms, would that be open to, we say, gymnastics or other events that are taking place, like some kind of using this as a multiplex, so like money generator that wouldn't just be for hockey, that if other groups came in for other events in our activity center, they have access to those dressing rooms?
Your Worship, for Councillor Keller, I think I would like to refer the bulk of that answer to Director Reed, but I would first say that from my seat, I could imagine that while we would have a desire to do that and would look at any opportunity to use those spaces rather than having them sort of dark, as they say, we would like to find those opportunities. I could imagine that it might provide some challenges just in terms of a functionality standpoint. So if there's some other group that was using some other part of the building, they need to retreat through a few sets of doors. It might not be practical, but I'd be curious what Mr. Reed would have to say about that type of purpose.
Thank you, CAO, given your worship through to Councillor Kelleher MP. I would agree entirely with what CAO Given just said. We would, of course, consider every space to be a multi-use space whenever possible and practicable. So in hockey season, there are going to be hockey change rooms, dressing rooms. But for example, this summer, there would be plenty of opportunity for them to be multi-purpose spaces or multi-use change rooms, to be more accurate.
Have administration considered ever a second sheet of ice? I've had numerous conversations this week with the community, and they're saying that, you know, you're going to go have 8 dressing rooms, but we only have 1 sheet of ice. is worth it.
Your worship, again, maybe Mr. Reed and I'll be a bit of a duo here. I'll handle this first and you can supplement from his operational perspective and experience in other communities. First thing that I would say is that a significant driver of the renovation project is actually the Culture and Recreation Facilities and Services Review that Council adopted last term. In there was a significant amount of input from residents through a resident survey and other methods that took place earlier. And I really identified that Jasper residents had a major focus on reinvesting in existing facilities before building new facilities. So this is in alignment with that general advice. And that's referenced in the report here where we show that of the 12 items proposed in that review as priorities, this proposed project delivers on 5 of them, which are all really about reinvestment rather than facilities. The second sort of aspects of that is that the land base within the municipality is a significant challenge for adding a second arena. We will be pushing the design team to come up with innovative solutions to be able to squeeze in the new ice plant outside of the existing building when it's being relocated this year, and the additional 5 change rooms. As council can imagine, we really don't have anywhere to attach a second sheet of ice. The final perspective, I think, from administration, why we didn't push the designers to consider that would be just the significant financial operating cost. Arenas of any type do not operate at a profit; they operate at a public subsidy, and so doubling the arena space would not exactly, but we could imagine it would double the required tax subsidy and would drive up. Would have a significant impact on everybody's taxes because of the operational subsidy required for arenas. So for all of those reasons, that wasn't something that administration included in the initial project scope. I think the other one, and Mr. Reed may have a little bit more recent information about this, but the addition of a complete new greenfield arena itself would likely be, more than our entire scope of required items of $10 million. Mr. Reed, do you have anything else to supplement that?
Again, CAO Given has definitely covered the lion's share of the points. I can definitely support that the addition of a second rink, certainly we could see that there would be a portion of a business case, but is there a complete business case that would make it tax free, if you will, or will not require a tax burden? That business case has not been shown to me, certainly. And that's all I would add.
Your Worship, I just wanted to address that. I know I took Mr. Reed down the path of talking about second sheet of ice, but I know Councillor Keller, and he also asked about 8 change rooms, but only 1 sheet of ice. Like, why do you need that? And Mr. Reed, maybe you want to speak to the operational reasons why modern facilities need that number of change rooms, vis-a-vis sort of younger children playing hockey and our mix of genders today.
Certainly, thank you, CAO Given. Again, Your Worship, through to Councillor Kelleher MP. That aspect, the modern hockey delivery at certain times involves 4 teams on the ice, and that is for practices as well as certain game situations. And so the efficiency of our operation, if we only had 4 or 5 change rooms as we do now, the efficiency means that when we're on those 4 team situations, there has to be enough gap between the next 4 teams coming on for the first 4 to get all the way out of the change rooms and the next 4 then to get in. And so that efficiency or that inefficiency is definitely a downside to having the limited number of change rooms that we have now. So 8 change rooms allows us to meet the needs of our residents, especially in the younger age groups, much more efficiently. The use of the ice, which is the costly bit of an arena operation, the use of the ice is maximized that way. So we would, in essence, have 4 on while 4 are changing. Those 4 immediately go on while the other 4 get to go back to their change room, change, cycle out. And so that operation is, for our local residents, going to be more efficient with 8 change rooms. Secondarily, any tournament that comes, 8 teams is a common number, and Right now, again, we have the inefficiencies of trying to accommodate 8 teams in our 5 dressing room rink. And so once we have 8 dressing rooms, tournament operations will also see a complementary increase in efficiency and thereby maximizing the use of the expensive part of the ice. I hope that helps.
Yes, that was very helpful. Thank you.
And the other element, Councillor Keller MP, that I think the public should know and council should be aware, and maybe there are other councillors that speak to this specifically, but is around the fact that in modern facilities, there's an expectation that men and women may be playing in the same hockey game. And I think historically that wasn't the case. It certainly is the case today where we have mixed gender teams, and the ability to accommodate players on the same team of different genders in their, sort of separate changing spaces. Even when we don't have 4 teams on the ice at once, we may have one team that may want to have private space for the changing part, and then be coming together for the coaching part in the changing rooms. And so that's a change that's happened to the sport over the years since the facility was originally built. And another reason why for modern users, whether they're locals or whether they're tournaments, being able to accommodate mixed gender teams really does require 8 change rooms rather than trying to have all that activity in those smaller line changes.
Guys, thank you, Mr. Given and Mr. Reed. That was great. I know nothing about hockey or change rooms, and I get asked a lot of questions, get a lot of comments, and I just need to ask the questions. Thank you.
Councillor Watson.
I was wondering, I was wondering about what would be all involved in the upgrading of the change rooms in the aquatic center, other than the replacement of the lockers.
Your worship, I may direct that one to Mr. Reed, but I'll say in the council requested scope, so the additional item, it is the complete refurbishment of them to a modern standard. I don't know if Mr. Reed would sort of cares to elaborate on exactly what that might include, but it is the difference between walking into them as they exist today with a fresh coat of paint versus walking into a new modern, changes that you would expect from a new facility. Mr. Reed, do you want to speak to what that might include?
Certainly. Thank you, CEO, given again your worship through to Councillor Waxer. So one of the easy examples, certainly the fit and finish, so the fixtures rather, but if we consider accessibility and inclusivity, the change rooms would be brought up to the modern standard for the space required, for example, for a wheelchair. Currently, we are really cramped in those change rooms. So finding ways to fit, to meet the multi-needs of our demographics and our community. And so really just being able to offer what is called modern, but is really just sort of industry standard for spacing, for number of fixtures, for the locker access even. If you recall back to the tour that we went on, there are plenty of spaces in those locker rooms that are really inaccessible. And so we've got square footage that we're not maximizing. And so I think that summarizes what we could look for in what kind of changes we'll see.
Councillor Wilson.
My question's regarding, construction timeline and forecasted closures, both in the arena as well as the aquatic center. What are the forecasted length of closures? Within the aquatic center, but also within the arena. Will the arena be operational this winter season? So just speak a bit further to kind of what kind of closures we're looking at.
Your worship, I'll speak to it at a high level and then throw it over to Director Reed again. But I'll just note that in all of the scopes and all of the costs do include a escalation as a result of phasing. So there's not there's not an expectation that it is shut down the entire building, all three buildings, and, for a year, and then in a year, the public can get in. The project is designed and the costs are included to be able to keep the facility as fully functional and operational and accessible to the community as possible, which would require closing and opening portions as renovations are happening. Director Reed, I'll pass over to you in terms of will the arena be functional this year?
Excellent question. Again, thank you, CAO, given for the high level coverage, and through your worship to Councillor Wilson. The intent, of course, is to have, as CAO given, as much open time as possible. Something like change rooms will require some form of closure. I would say that we are not at that design stage where we can comment on exactly how many weeks or when those weeks might occur. There will be shutdowns for sure, but we will minimize those. And one of the real benefits of the recommendation is that the existing change rooms at the arena can be fully functional. And so it's possible that we can really minimize the amount of downtime at the arena because we're building new. We can build the new and renovate the old as a possibility. But it is really important to recognize that the point we're at now is so high level, we don't have any dates or times. I would suggest, based on my experience with projects of this magnitude, that we would not be seeing any construction over at either of these places in the 2022 season, or year rather. But again, that's an estimation based on previous experience with different projects. We don't know how this project is going to go to tender. We don't know how the construction management process might unfurl a schedule. So I think staying at a high level at this time, knowing that we are going to maximize operational efficiency and maximize the days that our residents can use our assets, that's part of our whole goal with this project. But there will be some impacts and we will minimize those.
Thank you for that. I would like to shift focus a little bit, if I may. And although I made the motion from committee to recommend to council, I did so acknowledging that I had a level of discomfort for some. And that discomfort focuses primarily on the conversion of the sauna. So Mr. Gibbon, you indicated earlier that it would add functionality. The question I have is, can it possibly increase functionality by $133,000? We have, I think, existing universal washrooms already in place, so we would add a third, but do we need a third? I appreciate the sauna is unused, but potentially at some point there might be a different use. And then finally, I note that in the council requested scope, which is unfunded, that cost of $133,000 comes with a footnote, and the footnote says that the cost of conversion is contingent on the full renovation of all the washrooms, and we're not proceeding with the full renovation, so we don't get the economies of scale with respect to the sauna conversion. So we don't actually know the cost to be $133,000, and I expect the warning there is that it's going to be more than that if we're not also going with the other renovations. So I have some reservations about whether it is prudent, practical, and functional to proceed with those renovations at this time.
Your worship, I'll speak to the cost and leave it to Director Reed just to speak about sort of the program utilization that's imagined for that washroom and how it would enhance operations. In terms of the cost, administration is confident that while we're not going to see the benefits of the full renovation of the basement washrooms, the incremental cost of doing the conversion without the full renovation of the basement washrooms is able to be accommodated within the financial information this year. So within the project budget that's proposed and that is considered in the motion, administration is confident that we can handle the conversion of that sauna for that $133,000 of incremental additional cost. cost that's considered there. So no, we're not concerned that it would cost another $500,000 to get that $133,000 renovation, for example. We believe that it can be handled within the scope and the financial numbers that are presented there. And I'll pass over to Director Reed to give a little bit of a discussion about what administration would imagine operationally for that additional washroom space.
Thank you, CEO Given and Your Worship for the great question. So right now we have currently got what are typically known as a male and female change room for the racket sports courts, and now we have one of them used for basketball. So those change rooms are very gendered, and they are, again, the old design. So any inclusivity or accessibility gains we would like to make would require renovations of those two spaces. However, the opportunity that exists in that unused sauna space right now, or non-functional sauna space right now, allows us to meet accessibility and inclusivity goals both by creating a third washroom, which could be what we would consider at times needed a gender neutral washroom, and the wheelchair accessibility washroom as well. There is a further operational impact right now as we have the out of school care program actively enjoying those spaces in the basement, and that requires for licensing the locked washroom aspect for that service. And so right now, the female, or known previously as the female locker room, is closed off during out of school care hours. And so this option of a third space allows for that out of school licensing requirement to be met, while allowing for the male and female previously known as to return to those roles as male and female change rooms. And so administration felt that this is the best blend of finding a way to bring better service to our community while still recognizing that there is a financial impact to every choice we make. I do agree with CAO Given, we do believe in that number for this particular renovation.
Thank you both. I would take it then that we can lay this on the laps of the consultants. They chose the language, I think, but when it says conversion to third universal washroom, in fact, it's conversion to a third washroom, which will be really the first universal washroom. I mean, the implication is that we've already got two universal washrooms, but we have not, correct? Thank you for that clarification. And if it can be achieved at the price that's been quoted, even though we don't get the economies of scale, I appreciate whatever efforts you've expended to make sure that will happen. Thank you. All right, Councillor Calvert.
Chair Ireland, Mr. Given. So if we were to go ahead with all these renovations, last week you indicated that down the road, we still have about 7.1 million around there that we will have coming up over the next number of years that we will have to do, whether it's pumps or whatever within the facilities. Am I correct?
Your Worship, in terms of these sort of future items, yes. So as council will remember, a portion of the project was really a much more detailed look at the aquatic center. Administration has received the final version of that aquatic center feasibility assessment, and it in combination with the building condition assessment for the activity center in the arena, really together have laid out for administration what capital investment will be required for this facility in detail over the next number of years. The $10.1 million really uses the money that we already had for this purpose and puts it to its highest and best use on the highest priority items. There are, as you say, still approximately $7.5 million of other items that we're aware today need to be addressed, and administration had to do some trade-offs in recognition of the fact that we simply don't have all of the money that we need to have to reinvest in this facility. those items are called future required scope. They're items that do need to be done, or could be done, and will likely form ongoing capital budget requests to council that you would see for the 2023 budget, 2024 and beyond. So this is actually, I have two sort of views of this. One, it's a bit scary to know that, boy, we're going to spend this amount of money and there's still going to be money that we would need to spend on facilities. That is completely true. And I'm very thankful that we have this very detailed asset management information that will enable us to plan and prioritize and schedule improvements that need to be made. That information hasn't existed previously, and this will really enable administration to bring forward well detailed and validated recommendations to future capital plans. But it is correct that even though you know, the recommendations that are in front of you are in that $14 million range, there still is another $7.5 million of things that we could and should be doing to the facility to ensure that it continues to be viable and accessible to the community well into the future.
May I continue, Aaron?
Mhm.
So, Mr. Given, do you think we'll run out of money? So if we go ahead with this 14 million, 7.5 down the road, and what we currently already have in debentures, our debt limit, I think, is around 28, 29 million. And then we're looking at affordable housing down the road. Are we blocking that if we go ahead with this?
Certainly, the municipality does have a limited amount of money. And I think it's important to acknowledge that our limits are different than an individual or a business, in that the municipality does have the ability to generate its own revenue to the level that the community will tolerate through property taxes. And that is a discussion for council to decide what the community will tolerate. The province of Alberta does set debt limits on municipalities. And as we discussed during the budget, our debt limit is reflective of our revenue. So when council increases property taxes, our revenue increases and our debt limit also increases. So it is not as though that debt limit is a fixed number that never changes. It does change along with our revenue. And so council has the ability to impact that. That aside, current calculations do show that we have about $13.6 million left in our debt capacity for 2022. And administration can identify about $9.2 to $12.5 million of future borrowing that we know we need to do today for things like the utilities and other parts of the recreation such that are previously approved, such as the ice plant relocation. So that will be putting us close to our debt limit. That will mean that the administration and council, all things being equal, and without it relying on our debt capacity to increase, will need to make some choices. Administration in last week reported that one of the items that wasn't considered here is our ability to support any borrowing that might be required for an affordable or for housing build. That is not here because it's not a part of our future capital plan at this stage. The administration is examining whether there may be opportunities through the Jasper Community Housing Corporation to manage our debt in a different way that may not implicate the municipality's debt. The answer to that is unknown at this stage. But I think it's reasonable to say that the municipality has a relatively fixed and limited debt capacity. And this would use a significant portion of it.
Thank you, Mr. Given.
I appreciate that we do not yet have a motion on the table. I will ask for one, but I struggled about how to introduce this topic. I think it is fair that I just make mention of one item as a piece of background for the benefit of all council and for the public before we go into decision mode. And that is when I made the motion at committee of the whole to recommend to council, I did so expressing the hope that we would hear from the public with respect to this. It is a significant expenditure. Councillor Keller-Hempy is right that it will have an impact on debt limits and every time we spend, it comes with an opportunity cost. It means that we can't spend the same money on some other priority. So it's a challenge. I specifically requested or hoped for public feedback. And I want to acknowledge and show gratitude to Tourism Jasper for having responded to that outreach. The public won't be aware, but all of council and some administration received an email from Tourism Jasper on Sunday, which is too late to make our agenda, which is published on Friday, but I have confirmed with Mr. Jackson that he is agreeable, that I reference his letter in this venue. And apart from supporting the proposed investments in the activity center, and specifically the dressing room expansion and refurbishment, Tourism Jasper goes on to mention that the dressing room quality and size have impeded attracting certain groups in the past. However, improved dressing rooms will allow more robust tournaments and higher level groups to come to Jasper to enjoy the venue, driving significant economic benefits into the town. Although not top of mind for many when it comes to the visitor economy, Jasper's Activity Center is an important venue that drives material visitation to Jasper in critical need periods, winter and shoulder seasons. In addition to the incredible programs offered to locals, both short and long term, the center also acts as an effective recruitment tool as we continue to be challenged by workforce talent attraction and retention. He concludes by saying, I hope you will think of both the community and the economic benefits of this facility as you deliberate future investments. And so I invited comment from the public. We received some. I think it's fair to put it on the public record. Personally, I can't say that it changes my mind, but it is encouraging, I think, to hear that others see an inherent value in our activity center as one of the economic tools we can use to keep our economy strong and vibrant, and additionally as a tool that we can use to attract and retain a workforce. And we know that we are suffering in that regard. So things that we can do to make quality of life enhanced for all of our residents has a benefit beyond an economic benefit. So before we turn to deliberation and debate on a motion that I hope is forthcoming, I think it's important to have at least that sentiment from one segment of the population on the record. Councillor Reports.
Well, I really appreciate you bringing that forward because I wasn't exactly sure if I was allowed to comment on that letter. And now that that is available for discussion, I just wanted to point out again that, you know, in our current circumstances with our tax ratio, commercial to residential, I really, it's all about now communicating the value to the residents of the community. So we've heard from an agency that represents a certain sector of the community, you know, a big chunk of the commercial sector. And so value, again, when you break down what residents are actually contributing, you know, I brought up the 60-40 ratio earlier, like with a 40% investment. So, you know, even if you just consider half of that coming from residents, so now to me, it looks more like a 20% investment to get 80% back of value for the community. Then, so that's kind of like the focus I'm looking at. I do have a question through you, Mr. Mayor, to CAO Given. With regards to the debt limit and our capacity, you mentioned that it's highly based on revenue. Is it revenue over expenses actually that we're considering, or is it overall revenue?
Your worship, it is overall revenue, and it does also include utility revenue. And so the total revenues of the municipality from all sources. And so, for example, property taxes, utility revenue, revenue from fines, all other areas would include that total revenue.
Thank you for that. And okay, so I think that, you know, expanding on that, paid parking was the revenue that's expected for 2022 is factored into our debt capacity for this budget cycle, correct?
So paid parking revenue would be included in our debt calculation. My understanding is that the province only calculates the municipality's debt after we submit our debt. So it's a trailing indicator, not a forward-looking indicator. So our debt limit isn't based on our future predicted revenues, it's based on our revenues from the past year.
Right, so that we might have an opportunity going forward for 2023 beyond, when we're able to calculate some of that extra revenue. And again, another basis for argument, because we're in a tourism destination area, that we should be looking for other tools that could help, you know, our tourism capacity in the community. And I think when we go forward and looking at our debt capacity and looking at our major industry or our community, it's something that's quite evident that's needed for when you look at exercises like this. So just another point, but I appreciate the clarification.
Is there a councillor prepared to make a motion? Councillor Hall?
I'll start the process. I'm wondering, though, are we breaking these down into separate motions?
There is an opportunity to do that. You don't need to start that way,
Okay.
but if there is a request for division from any councillor, I will divide the question, but you don't need to start that way.
Okay, then I would like to make a motion that council approve the activity center renovation project scope, inclusive of all items, inclusive of all required scope items at a total cost of $10,160,444. And I'd also like to move that council approve the inclusion of the following council requested scope items: year-end dressing room expansion to the west and south for $3,355,756. The activity center conversion of the sauna to an additional washroom for $133,238. And the aquatic center complete renovation of all existing change rooms for $342,497. I'd also like to move that we approve an amendment to the capital budget as required to reflect the above items as funded.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Do you wish to speak to the motion?
Sure. The required scope, I think, is a no-brainer, but I do want to talk about the dressing rooms, and everything Mr. Given has said is correct. As a parent who has kids who play hockey, as a female who's played hockey, our dressing rooms are small, and I know we talked about lots of teams come with lots of different types of kids, but as a female adult who has had to play with adult males, sharing a shower is not ideal or okay. And I think our rooms are small, and I've been excited for a dressing room expansion even before I was on council, but it is important. I do think it's important.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Any other debate? Councillor Kelleher?
I agree with Councillor Hall. I've been convinced by both CEO Given and Director Reid. I think it's important that we look forward to 20 years from now. I don't have children, but I see lots of children in the community. I see lots of people with grandchildren in the community. And if we don't put money into our assets and grow our asset for this community, we'll go nowhere. I just feel like it's an economic developer. It's good for our economic development. It's good to have teams come here. So I'm in total support of the expansion.
Councillor DeMoy?
I think it's a good motion. I'm in full support of it. My only concern going forward is, our other funding sources for other community things that are more visible in town. And I know that the behind the scenes stuff isn't as attractive, but are necessary. So we have to get creative about how we're going to fund things in the future. And, you know, some will say you have to jump sometimes and the net will appear. This is that one of them. So I'm quite happy. So.
Councillor Melvin?
Thank you, Your Worship. I do also want to point out with the motion, by including the aquatic center complete renovation of the existing change rooms, we're actually only going into that area once. for disruption, which I think will have a longer term efficiencies in construction. So I'm glad the council agreed to include that in this round of motions.
Thank you all. Any further debate? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you, Mr. Gibbon and administration, Mr. Reed, for seeing this through.
And thank you,
Getting
Your
it to this
Worship.
point.
This is certainly a significant milestone. The administration will take this back, project team and council and community will see additional steps going forward. I would imagine one of the next steps would be the engagement of the construction manager and the initiation of detailed design on the project as and the scope as defined by council. So you can expect to see the ongoing project updates at different milestones. And the administration will likely at some point in the future bring forward a revised project schedule. Now that we know the scope. So thank you, council, for giving us that direction, and we'll be back to you and the community with additional information on the project proceeds.
Thank you for that. We are now almost 2 hours in. We have an extensive agenda today. I'm going to propose that we take a brief recess now and reconvene in what I have as 7 minutes. So 3:30, we will come back. Till then, we'll be recessed. Thank you. Keeping with the orders of the day, we are back 2 minutes late. It's 3:33, but I will call us back to session. We are at agenda item 6.2, garage suites feedback. And Mr. Gibbon, are you leading anything on this particular topic?
Your Worship, this is a recommendation from committee. The attached proposed policy, interim policy on garage suites from Parks was reviewed at the committee. One thing that I will say is that much of the municipality's previous input from dialogue with Parks is included and incorporated into the proposed interim policy. And at the committee meeting, committee provided administration some additional comment on side yard setbacks for garage suites and a couple of other items. Administration has passed on that feedback to Parks already. So for those of you that were keeping score at home in terms of the motions that were made at committee and then the things that show up here at council, a portion of the motion at committee on this item was interpreted as direction to administration to provide that input to Parks. We have done that. So the portion that was left to come to council is the motion that you see that the recommendation that council accept the interim garage suite policy in principle.
Thank you for that, Mr. Gibbon. If it provides sufficient clarity, we dealt with this extensively a week ago. Both a motion for recommendation and a direction emanated from committee of the whole. The direction has already been realized, so we are left with the recommendation from committee to council. Is there a councillor prepared to make the motion? Councillor Mellon?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I do make the motion that council accept the interim garage suite policy in principle.
Thank you, Councillor Mellon. Do you wish to speak to the motion?
I just would like to add my support to this in that this is yet another opportunity where we will be able to add additional housing, and anything we can do to move that along on a timely basis, I think is appropriate.
Thank you for that. Anybody else wish to speak to the motion? I see no hands. I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you for that. That takes us to agenda item 6.3, Communities in Bloom Proclamation. And perhaps, although you missed some of the earlier discussion, it might be appropriate, Councillor Waxer, if that was a motion put forward by you.
I'd be happy to. I just lost my place. I'll be right with you. I would like to propose that, move that council proclaim 2022 the year of the garden in Jasper.
Thank you for that. Do you wish to speak to the motion at all?
No, just that I've spoken to the Communities in Bloom people, the committee, and they're very excited about the possibilities for this year, and I'm looking forward to working with them on that.
Thank you for that. Is there any debate about the motion? Seeing nothing, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. I therefore do so proclaim 2022 to be the year of the garden in Jasper. That takes us to agenda item 6.4, police invoicing, shadow population modifier. Again, a recommendation coming to council from committee of the whole. Is there a councillor prepared to make a motion with respect to the modifier that is or could be used, and that is the shadow population modifier, which is proposed but not yet applied to Jasper? Councillor Calhoun.
That council authorized the mayor to write to the appropriate minister to request that the shadow population modifier be applied to the municipality of Jasper.
Thank you, Councillor Calhoun. Is there any debate about that motion? All right, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. That is carried. Mr. Given, just for clarity, the motion speaks to the appropriate minister. I assume that will be the Minister of Justice and Solicitor General is the appropriate authority.
Your worship, yes, that's who would be responsible for the police funding model. Would suggest that likely the Minister of Municipal Affairs would be a good copy, and others that you decide, but the minister responsible for this program would be the Minister of Justice and Solicitor General.
Agenda item 6.5, Lutheran Church property opportunity. Councillor Demota added your request, so you can speak to that.
Voda. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to CAO Given. I was wondering if Mr. Reed was available, if you had a discussion with him, whether he could be present for this. Okay, good. I see that he's come on the screen. I recently attended a Jasper Community Team Society meeting, and this discussion was brought up. We had some healthy conversation about it, and I would like to get Mr. Reed's interpretation. He brought this forward for discussion, and I'd like to have some follow-up after that as well. If that's okay. Did I put you on the spot, sir?
No, not at all. Your worship, through to Councillor Demota. So indeed, the Jasper Community Society did discuss the possibility presented by the Lutheran Church and the congregation's request for proposals. And the discussion that we entertained at the most recent meeting revolved around the opportunity that exists and what that space could become in our community to the benefit of the broader community. and the idea that the Jasper Community Team Society is a possible applicant to that proposal. And the discussions centered around whether or not the Jasper Community Team Society could play that role, what capacity they currently had, and what exactly they envisioned for that possible use of that space. And the net result of that discussion was that it's fair to say that the Jasper Community Team Society is definitely open to partnering with any group in the community and would be open to discussing certainly the possibilities that they might be able to entertain to sort of maintain that asset as a community asset to the benefit of the broader community. I'm not sure if that covers everything you may have experienced there or may have wanted me to cover, but that's a pretty good summary of the point it's at now. That group is definitely open to it and is considering what they might do or who they might partner with. And certainly the role of the Jasper Community Team Society is that of supporting the municipality. So there is, if the municipality was open to partnership, the Jasper Community Team Society would definitely entertain discussion. Yeah, and that's where I'll end.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reed, and I really appreciate that, and I'm glad that you spoke to it. And I have to explain to council that I did get quite excited about thinking about the opportunity last week, not knowing that Mr. Reed had already submitted that topic for discussion at the Jasper Community Team, and I had missed that, unfortunately, when that came in. So I was quite delighted that that was a topic of conversation. And last week, when I brought this up to discuss with council, Mr. Given had mentioned that maybe that this should be council driven for ideas that might, suit the purpose of that area or that building. And I'm still kind of on the fence of maybe administration and people that are involved in the 24/7 of the municipal operations are better suited to address gaps or maybe user groups or something that space could fulfill in our service. So as a broad user of many things, I don't know exactly what could be best use of that, but I don't want that opportunity to slip away without trying to keep it as a community asset that could benefit the community and the members, the residents that live here.
Thank you, Councillor Tomoto. Any other comments? From my perspective, I appreciate you bringing the matter forward. I am aware that there are a number of groups in the community looking to respond to the request for proposals, if that's what it is, from the Lutheran Church, and I wish them all well. I'm not sure how the decision will be made from the perspective of the municipality. It seems to me that our primary concern continues to be housing. And so if the Jasper Community Housing Corporation wish to consider whether there is any viable use of that land retaining the existing structures, I would welcome that. But from council's perspective, I'm not personally inclined to enter a contest with community groups that are already lining up to indicate a request for use of land. If they are successful, I wouldn't be surprised if some of them come and ask us for assistance in any event, but from my perspective, I prefer to let community groups have the first opportunity, and then if there are requests for us to assist later, that would be great. But if it was to be a municipally led initiative, I would think that there is no greater need of housing, and whether the existing facilities retained could be an attribute to some sort of housing, I'm not quite sure. But the Jasper Community Housing Corporation, if it chooses, could take a look at that.
So, just to have the discussion at this level, where the Jasper Community Team Society might be looking at partnering with the municipality for a community initiative. And that request is coming forward through me as the representative on, the council representative on that, to potentially ask for a partnership with the municipality. If I put forward a motion like that and it gets defeated, I would be quite embarrassed to, now that optically, I'm just kind of stuck in the point where, if we're not going to investigate that partnership opportunity, like administration could come back and say, maybe this isn't worthwhile, but if we don't explore it, then I'm not sure where I'm at.
Councillor Hall?
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Would the municipality be allowed to apply? Isn't it just for nonprofit groups, or would that be a thing we could do? Like I've seen the letters that the church has distributed, and it's quite clear it's nonprofit groups only, or I could see the Jasper Community Team Society partnering with the JCHC, but I don't know if they could partner with the municipality.
Councillor Wilson?
I wasn't gonna answer, Councilor Hall's question, but I could speak about GCHC.
Okay, well, defer for a moment. I'm not sufficiently familiar with the letter now to be able to comment whether it was restricted to nonprofit groups, but if that is the case, it's a concern, or at least an item to take into consideration. But my thought generally is, if the Jasper Community Team has a proposal for a partnership, I would certainly be prepared to entertain that. But just to say we'll partner on something that's indistinct, I don't know where that leads us, because I understand that there is sort of broad interest in the community, and I don't want to presuppose that one interest trumps another. Go ahead.
Fair enough. I can go back and bring that. Hopefully there's a good enough timeline. We can address that. We have till June 30th, I believe. So yeah, I appreciate that it's in the direction. So I'll go back to the request. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to discuss it.
Well, perhaps not yet then, Councillor Wilson.
No, I was only gonna suggest that, as chair of the JCHC, we could, I could take this back to them, but in my mind, in my own opinion, I think that we owe our efforts to finding housing solutions on the parcels of land that are currently zoned housing, or opportunity for housing, as well as we've just put in a huge amount of infrastructure to servicing these lots. So to distract our attention from finding viable solutions to housing solutions in those key parcels, and putting our limited efforts towards the possibility of maybe housing in that parcel, which is a bit of an awkward parcel, and I don't think serviced as well, or service for housing at this point. It's currently not zoned housing, so I don't think that it may see too much support at the JCHC level, but not something that we could take it there for discussion. And
Thank you for that. Councillor DeMoe?
It'd be a good spot for dedicated seniors housing. That's something that Parks Canada is willing to rezone, but if that doesn't get explored, then, you're not asking the question. You're not going to hear the answers. Just my idea.
All right, thank you for raising the topic, and I expect that when you return to Jasper Community Team, you might be back to raise it again, and that's fair. That takes us to agenda item 6.6. Again, it's under request for decision, but not from administration, brought forward by Councillors Melnick and Waxer, just with respect to attendance at the Alberta Japan Twinning Association. Councillor Melnick, you brought it forward, so you can address it.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I just did want to address this opportunity for Councillor Waxer and myself to attend the Alberta Japan Twin Municipalities Association. We've not attended for a number of years due to COVID, and the association's meeting again. The association, in addition to supporting, it's an association of other municipalities within the province who have twin relationships with their counterparts in Japan. And of course, we have the oldest relationship in the province, and it would be, I think, most appropriate for us to be in attendance. The objectives of this organization are to develop and promote friendship and goodwill between citizens of the Alberta and Japan twin municipalities and citizens in Japan and their surrounding areas. It also is to work in conjunction with the federal and provincial ministries of international and intergovernmental relations, the Office of the Consul General of Japan, and other organizations already promoting Japanese culture. Also to promote informal, informational, and cultural exchanges between groups, service clubs, schools, civic organizations, businesses, and individuals for all ages, interests, and abilities in the twin communities. And of course, to explore economic and tourism opportunities. And again, we have this relationship. We also have a sister relationship with a ski hill in, I believe, Marmot Basin does in Japan. So it goes part and parcel with us coming out of COVID and maintaining those relationships as we go forward. We have been in touch, or the municipality has been in contact with our sister city in Japan and Hakone, and we're looking forward to continuing those relationships as we move forward. I bring this forward on behalf of Councillor Waxer. She was away, she's now back, and myself, just to present it to Council that this is our intention as part of our hospitality and Twin City Council duties to attend this conference.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick, and I do appreciate you bringing it forward in this fashion. I had been asked earlier by Councillor Melnick whether it was necessary, in my view, if councillors have been appointed to a committee and there is a relevant activity for that committee, they need not request council approval, but if there is time, there is certainly no harm in requesting council approval. And so, Councillor Melnick, you have quite thoroughly canvassed it all, and I do appreciate that. And it is up to council to grant approval, but I have no hesitation in saying that you and Councillor Waxer have been assigned to a committee for a purpose, and it is expected that you will take advantage of those opportunities. So I certainly will vote in favor of the motion. And I do recognize as well that, as Councillor Melnick indicated, we are the senior twin association in all of Alberta. In fact, we exceed even the province in its affiliation with its sister province in Japan. And in fact, in July of this year, we will celebrate our 50th anniversary of our twin relationship with Hakone, which is tremendously significant. So it is important, I think, that we retain these ties at this time, in part as we come out of COVID, but regardless, it's a long-standing relationship, and there's value in retaining it. So if it is your motion, Councillor Melnick, to grant approval to you and Councillor Waxer to attend the conference in, where do you get it?
Tabor.
Bring back some corn.
That is my intention to make that motion, Your Worship, and I think you articulated it quite well for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further debate? All those in favor? You may vote. All right, there are none opposed. That is carried. So enjoy your trip to Tabor. And is that near your anniversary? You
Too fast.
That takes us to agenda item 7, correspondence for information, consideration, or action. We have first an email from Melissa Ross regarding Jasper bylaw number 126, and in particular concerns about the damage done by off-leash cats and off-door cats to birds in the area, and question what else we can do about that. I wonder, although there has been no direction to administration at this point, Mr. Gibbon, I wonder whether you have any indication from bylaw about any issues that they have or programs that they might have with respect to enforcing the existing bylaw.
Your worship, administration wasn't made aware of any pre-existing or acute concern regarding this. I think administration was well aware and enforcement was well aware of the risks to the bird population and domestic animals. I think that's the reason that the bylaw is in place. I know that the bylaw department does work to enforce this to the extent that they can, given the resources that they have and the hours a day. I think the resident certainly wanted to create a public awareness of their responsibilities under the bylaw, which administration would certainly support the public being aware of the requirement to ensure that cats in particular are under control in respect to the bird population. But administration isn't aware of any particular acute issues that would raise this. I think this is a matter of a resident that has a priority concern to them. They want to ensure received some public exposure to council people. But there wasn't an administrative sort of imperative that we could associate with this.
Thank you for that. Anybody comments from other councillors? I do make note of the fact that the letter writer has requested specifically a public awareness campaign, but focused on both cat positive and bird positive behaviors, which I thought was a nuanced touch and much appreciated. And even without a public awareness campaign, if the matter is circulated as it is here in the public domain at a council meeting and perhaps picked up by the press, that certainly will assist. But the specific request is for a public awareness campaign. I'm not quite sure what that would look like, but I leave that to council for any direction that we might want to go on. Councillor Wilson.
I fully support the information that we've received in this regard, and I support bylaw enforcing the bylaw in the specific bylaw as much as they can. But a public awareness campaign I would see would better fit Parks Canada. It's wildlife conflict of sorts, and I would definitely encourage the letter writer to request a public information campaign from Parks Canada. I think it's in their realm a little bit more so than the municipalities.
Thank you for that. I might suggest as well for consideration that although it would fall short of any definition of a campaign, that when council highlights go out, there might just be mentioned that this was brought to council's attention and as a public service, broaden awareness through council highlights. Again, it's a limited campaign, but it does help get the message out. Councillor Waxer.
I also wondered I also wondered whether we might just send out a reminder about the bylaw and the need to be careful, particularly at this time. Just like we send out perhaps reminders about other elements.
I thought of that as well. Typically, we do that with utility billings, although it seems to me that there might be other issues that we want to convey at that time. So I would prefer not to direct staff yet because we don't know what other message we might want to communicate at that time, but I appreciate the sentiment. All right, if there's nothing else on that, the next piece of correspondence is a letter from the Jasper Food Bank Society requesting a cardboard recycling bin. I appreciate that this has come to council, but it might have gone to administration or could be dealt with at that level. I just wonder whether administration has any sense of that.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. This actually, I directed this come here. There was a request from the Food Bank Society to provide a bin and that the municipality provide the service. And it's my opinion that requests for service at a reduced or no cost should be subject to council approval. I don't think administration has the authority to do that. And I know that certainly within some of the bylaws in the municipality, the CAO only has the authority of up to $1,000 to request, to give a waiver of certain kinds of fees. So with that context and knowing that council might wish to consider this, I recommended to Director Reed when he had this request from the society that they should formalize it and it should be brought to council attention for your consideration. Director Greathead advises that in their view, the cost of pickup would be approximately $1,700 a year of expense for the municipality to do that pickup for the society. If it was just simply stored neatly, the cost of a bin itself would be approximately $7,000. So there's the, if the Food Bank Society would ensure that their cardboard is stored neatly, then our staff could pick that up. There would be an operational expense to that associated with doing that service of about $1,700 a year. If they wish to have the municipality provide them a bin at no charge, that would be an expense of about $7,000 for the municipality. Administration is happy to take direction from council on this. The only thing that I might raise for council is whether there's an objective standard on what types of organizations we wouldn't do this for, and what sort of what situations we should consider this. Because certainly the Food Bank Society isn't the only not-for-profit organization in the municipality that might generate cardboard waste, and council may face additional requests from other organizations that may wish to receive the same treatment. So administration would recommend that if council had a view to supporting this request, you may want to refer to administration to develop a policy on the matter. Or council could choose to approve it directly without creating a policy on the matter, and that would be up to council to decide which would be the best approach.
Thank you for that, Mr. Giddens. One of the questions that occurred to me is the position of the Anglican Church with respect to the request. And I'm not quite sure what it means to say located adjacent to the Anglican Church. Does it mean on church property? Does it mean on public property close by the church? We've had issues in the community previously about the location of garbage bins, not necessarily cardboard recycling bins, but garbage bins adjacent to leasehold property, even though on public property. And it's a real challenge because we don't have a lot of public property where we can position these, and so often we are at the will of leaseholders. And the Anglican Church is, I think, a designated Class A heritage building where a receptacle might be appropriately located adjacent to such a building is of some concern, and I would certainly think that that should be canvassed as along with other matters. So I personally would be happy to refer it to administration for, as you suggest, perhaps the development of a policy, but also included in that policy how these can be positioned, in particular regard to the property interests of adjacent properties. Anything else from council? Councillor Wilson?
Do we know how they're currently dealing with their cardboard disposal?
I'm not sure if Mr. Reed is still on with us on the Zoom. I know that this request did come through him, and he may have information on that.
Thank you, CEO, given through your worship to Councillor Wilson. They are currently, through the use of volunteers, managing to put that cardboard in the system somehow. So they are typically taking volunteers, take their own vehicles, and then take it to the recycle depot that we have set up. And I could add that that is one of the reasons that they're making this request, is that is very challenging for them to get those volunteers to be able to do that particular role.
Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
In my opinion, short term, I would support offering pickup and maybe suggesting that the Anglican Church set aside some space for them to store neatly cardboard, and then we can have a further discussion on whether a bin would be required. Okay. So to assist them in the short term with pickup.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Hall, and then Councillor Callahan.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I agree with Councillor Wilson. I also wonder how often would the municipality pick up recycling for $1,700 a year? Is that, and how often does the food bank open? Does anybody know this?
Your worship, Director Reed may have some information on the operating of the Food Bank Society.
I can speak to this. They are looking to a weekly pickup. They do typically operate weekly, and they do create quite a mass of cardboard.
Councillor Callahan.
Mr. Schumer, Ireland's history, does this also include the recovery, the food recovery group as well?
I think, Your Worship, through to Councillor Kelleher, you were asking if this also includes the food recovery group, and if that's your question, I just couldn't quite hear you. And so yes, this is also, the food recovery group works out of the same space, and so their cardboard is also part of the challenge here.
Thank you.
Councillor Mellon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Is it possible that we may just need to add another bin in that area and move around some of the existing bins so that it is a benefit to the entire community who are close to the church? In other words, municipality takes it upon ourselves to find another location and also maybe move some of the other bins so they may be closer to other residents because we've added another bin.
Councillor Callahan.
My question to you, Mayor, to Councillor Melnick. So you're suggesting that we take one of the bins from the current areas and put it so that it's not an extra $7,000 spent?
My suggestion is to add another bin at the municipality expense Unfortunately, with a not-for-profit collecting, the recycling fees are not going to be close to paying for it. But in the end, we would probably solve the problem for them and also perhaps assist some of our residents in the area as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I don't want to take myself into a position of trying to understand operational needs. Rereading the letter, I see that the suggestion is that possibly a bin could be in one of the parking lots, but if it is a parking lot full of cars, I'm not quite sure how operationally we get to it, but it does occur to me that there is a garbage bin on Hazel, only steps away from the Anglican Church parking lot, I would call it. So you might be onto something, Councillor Melnick, if there was an additional cardboard bin placed adjacent to that existing garbage bin, which is on public property on the west side of Hazel. That might solve the problem and enhance accessibility for cardboard recycling for everybody in that block. So I would be inclined perhaps to direct this to administration to give us some options and see what can be done that will help the Jasper Food Bank Society with its issue, but also would be administratively and operationally efficient, because I doubt that we could achieve operational efficiency at this table.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a degree of consensus that we ask the administration to report back about options of that nature? And Mr. Gibbon, are you comfortable with that? Do you have sufficient direction?
Your worship, if someone would like to make that direction in the form of a motion, so that administration can ensure that it's on the motion action list. And I do that not to be a stickler, but really to illustrate that this will go in with the other things that are on the motion action list and other priorities. And then that way it also ensure that it gets tracked and followed up on. And we would expect that we would return with a report to committee for committee's discussion, deliberation, and decision, and then recommendation forward to council.
Thank you for that. Councillor Melnick, that was your motion, wasn't it?
That was my motion, and I appreciate again the articulation for that, and appreciate there's lots on administration's plate, and keeping things tracked, keeping us also moving forward is important, and I appreciate having it on the motion action list. So yes, I would make that motion, your worship.
Thank you for that. Councillor Melnick, any debates? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. The next agenda item, correspondence for information, consideration, or action, is the letter received from Community Futures West Yellowhead. Do any of the representatives from Community Futures West Yellowhead wish to speak to that matter at all? Self-explanatory.
Self-explanatory. Answer any questions. This initiative is through Prairie County Development, which used to be Western Diversification, which now is Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, because BC has its own. Community Futures does a lot of economic development for our region. For the limited region, including the MD review, we've had a number of new business starts within the region, and we've had a lot of business.
Thank you for that. Take that as correspondence for information, and so received. Agenda item 8, Other new business? Well, I do in fact have a piece of other new business that I neglected to mention earlier. It has come to my attention reading the municipal information news that I get daily. There was an article yesterday, I think, by Gordon Hume, who writes often on municipal matters. He's a recognized writer and consultant on those issues. And on his own volition, he indicated that if it was up to him, Friday would be proclaimed as Be Kind to Municipal Treasurers Day. And he articulated all of the challenges that financial people in municipalities are facing right now, including rising interest rates and increasing infrastructure debt, the expectation of increased requests for wages in union contracts. And he indicated that it is a very tough time, as it often is, for municipal administrators, particularly those involved in financial aspects. And he calls them treasurers, but I recognize that he means, in our context, our director of administration and finance. And so I just joined with him in saying, yeah, good call. Let's make Friday, and probably every day this week, be kind to our own CFO, and thank Ms. Malinchuk for all that she does. I think it was an appropriate comment by Mr. Hume, and happy to extend it at the local level. That is my new business. Agenda item 9, motion action list. It is there for reference. We updated the motion action list last week at committee of the whole, so it was just there as a reminder of where things sit. And as Mr. Given so properly indicated, it's good to have things on the motion action list so we don't lose track, and we know that things that council has requested are being actioned. Agenda item 10, councillor reports. Are there reports from councillors? Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Island. I will be attending a adult community conversation tomorrow. This morning, we had our very first legislative community meeting, which was great. And for the next 4 weeks, I'm in a Zoom for a library board basics course. It's free. I don't need any liquor. Just very excited.
Other reports? Councillor DeMora.
Yeah, attended the Community Futures West Yellowhead board meeting on April 28th, last Thursday, with Councillor Keller MP. As I put her on the spot, it's my turn to be on the spot now. There's up to 50 applicants now, without any advertising, for the Lemonade Day coming up in June 18th. There's a lot of young people that are interested and eager to participate. Quite a few projects going outside of the park here, particularly in Greenview. I forget the name of a particular project, but also with the coal mine scheduled to open, there's going to be 2,000 jobs being generated and created just outside the park here. Interestingly enough, Edson's going through a water and sewer review. And we discussed some of our stepping stones that we're taking in our community for some advice there. But, you know, they feel with their research in other areas that they're underfunding their projects as well. And their water rates right now are $1.46 for water and $1.51 for sewer. So You can see that other municipalities are going through other considerations to see how sustainable their treatment plants and in-ground services are. So we discussed the issue of the parking here in the community. And then Edson and Hinton, oddly enough, went through strat planning sessions recently and really praised, going with a third party to do the exercises. They, with their efforts, they did council only. So we talked about the differences, and I felt that with our exercise, it was worthwhile for this group to have administration there. So there were lots of discussions on many topics, but those are the highlights, some of the ones that I think that were, bigger topics. So anyway, I don't want to take more time on that.
Thank you. I will report, and many of you will have been part of these, but I attended last Wednesday the launch of our new logo and visual identity here in this room. I thought that it went extremely well, and we can see now on our own agenda the new logo, and I think that it looks spectacular. So thank you again to staff who did all of that work. It's really nice to see that. On Friday of last week, Mr. Gibbon and I attended a virtual meeting with our counterparts in Banff and Canmore and our respective MLAs to talk about furthering the initiative for pursuit of recognition of status and acquisition potentially of tools, but even short of tools. We talked specifically about such things as the modifier, in respect to which council earlier today directed that I write a letter. So there are other steps that the provincial government could take on our behalf to help our revenue stream, even if it's short of tools. But just to let you know that that initiative is continuing, and a recent meeting in that regard, not as a duty of council, but just as residents. Councillor Hall, Councillor Wilson, and I all wound up at the Uplift Jasper Mural Festival unveiling of the Indigenous piece of art at the Jasper Pizza Place last Friday, and I have to say that the community receptiveness to the entire project and to that Indigenous piece has just been spectacular. So it's been a great addition to the community, I think. Yesterday, I spent a considerable amount of time interviewing with Jason Stockfish of the FITU with respect to a publication that's going to come out perhaps in June, something a little bit different than the weekly edition of the FITU. So I spent some time with him, quite a bit of time with him actually yesterday, and I also had a relatively shorter interview with CDC yesterday that will be aired, and I can't remember exactly when, but I will get notice, so I will let you know, and it will be both television and radio, as I understand, related in part to youth vaccination rates in Jasper, which are the highest in the province, and they are noted for that. So it's a good news story in that respect, and then also some focus on tourism and what to expect this summer. And finally, as Councillor Hall indicated, the Legislative Committee met for the first time this morning, and one of the things that hopefully you will see shortly is a slight change to our agenda, so that on regular meeting agendas, we will potentially be approving minutes from the most recent committee of the whole. So on two matters today, at least two matters, we dealt with recommendations from committee from last week but in fact, we won't have an opportunity to even see or approve those minutes till next week. So to draw that forward, understanding that there may be staff capacity issues, but recognizing their diligence, we are hoping that we will soon be able to institute a small change to our agenda to deal with committee of the whole minutes at regular council meetings the following week. And I think that would keep us all better informed and would be a really useful first step taken by the legislative committee. And that is my report. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. In an exercise to, I was trying not to speak too long. I did have another committee to report on, and that was the Jasper Community Team Society. We do have an application for a new secretary there, which is great. Sometimes those positions are hard to canvass for. One of the highlights of the meeting was that I learned that the Victim Services Fund is being amalgamated into the crisis team. So all the money that was raised here in the community gets to stay here. And I believe that that group will be assuming the role of the annual golf tournament fundraiser. So that would keep money for the crisis team and not specifically focus on victims of crime anymore. So that I think that was some good news. Of course, the Lutheran Church came up. There were some ideas that were discussed, and I think that I can bring those back for discussion and then come forward if there's an initiative that needs to be addressed with the municipality. And then also discussed was the Cinnamon Bear book be available to give out for new refugee families that are coming to the community, which I thought was great. And also to announce that our AGM is coming up here at the end of May. The annual general meeting, I believe, is scheduled for the 26th. So we're definitely inviting council and other members of the community to come and participate. We're hoping that it'll be a nice get together. Location TBA. So I'll let you know as soon as that one's set. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. If there are no further reports, we can turn to agenda item 11, upcoming events. There is a fairly long list of upcoming events. Are there any events to be added to the list to bring to the attention of council and potentially the public? I would just add that on the list is the community-wide Fire Smart Day on May 14th, and just remind councillors that I think we all received an invitation for a fire bee at the Southview Co-op on that particular day, so just be aware of that. And I would also indicate, and I may have done this earlier as well, that June 24th, I think, is graduation day. It is, okay, 29th. It is June 24th for the Col de Rocher, and I am going to be away for a week then, and so I would, in most instances, defer to Deputy Mayor, who will be Councillor Waxer on both of those days, but Councillor Hall is also the mother of a graduate this year, so you might have an interest in that. So I will just leave it to the two of you, if you would, to sort out who might be able to respond, and I will give you the particulars for École de Rocher. They have a single graduate that day, given the nature of the school, but they're doing it in the gymnasium, and so full credit. That's wonderful for them. So that is June 24th in the afternoon, and the other, as Councillor Hall has just indicated, is June 29th. And finally, I simply have a question. We all know that July 1st is Canada Day. I am just wondering whether we know whether we are hosting a pancake breakfast, and what the status of Canada Day events are, so that we can help promote those on our agenda, just giving notice to the public.
I can speak to that. We had a Canada Day committee meeting last Thursday. CEO Gibbon is also on that committee, and yes, we are moving forward with a celebration. A traditional Jasper celebration with the breakfast, the parade, Parks Canada flag raising, and a party in Centennial Park after. So yes, there will be some celebrations, so excited to flip some pancakes.
Thank you for that. If there are no other items to add to the list of upcoming events, I would invite us to adjourn. Councillor Miller, you so moved.
So moved.
All in favor? Thank you all. We are adjourned. Thank you to members of the public who have spent the last 3 hours with us. We very much appreciate that. And we will be back next Tuesday morning at 9:30 with Councillor Waxer in the chair.
Nice.
Thank you all. Good day.